You remember the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan back in 2021, right? I mean, it was chaotic, a massive evacuation effort. Well, a U.S. Marine veteran who was actually there, on the ground helping, has been arguing ever since that the speed of that whole operation created a serious, long-term security risk. He's convinced it was a critical mistake. So let's break down exactly why he's sounding the alarm.
I knew immediately it can't go well. That was the first thought from veteran Chad Robichaux as he was literally watching tens of thousands of Afghan nationals get on planes headed for the United States. And this wasn't just some fleeting thought. It was a conviction rooted in his understanding of the people involved and the process that was unfolding, a process he believes was fundamentally flawed from the start.
Okay, so to really get a handle on his concerns, we're going to walk through this in 4 parts. We'll start with a recent event in Texas that brought this whole issue back into the spotlight. Then we'll look at the sheer scale of the evacuation. After that, we'll break down his core argument about vetting. And finally, we'll explore his theory on why a former ally might turn into a threat.
So why is this warning from 2021 suddenly so relevant again? Well, the story picks up with a recent arrest in Texas that, for him, was a sadly predictable outcome. So here's what happened. An Afghan national who was reportedly admitted to the U.S. after that withdrawal was arrested in Texas. Why? Because he allegedly posted a video that appeared to show he was building a bomb. For the veteran we're focusing on, this wasn't a shock. It was the exact scenario he'd been worried about since 2021. And to really understand his warning, you have to look at the numbers. The sheer scale of that evacuation is right at the heart of his concern. During that frantic period, somewhere between 80,000 and 100,000 Afghan nationals were put on planes and flown directly to the United States. Just think about that number. Based on that alone, the veteran came to an immediate and, well, pretty unsettling conclusion. And this was his prediction at the time. He argued that with such a massive group brought in so quickly, it was just a numbers game. Simple probability meant that someone with bad intentions was bound to slip through. But for him, the real failure wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the process itself. And that brings us right to the core of his argument. A really critical distinction he makes between two very different kinds of vetting. First, let's just make sure we're all on the same page with what vetting is. It's the official process of doing a background check. Pretty straightforward, right? Well, the veteran argues that not all vetting is created equal, not by a long shot. And this is where he believes the real failure happened. Okay, here's his crucial distinction. On the left, you've got vetting for a combatant. This is something intelligence agencies like the CIA would handle. The goal is simple: find an ally for the battlefield. The guiding principle is basically, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But he argues that's completely different from the process on the right, vetting for a U.S. resident. That's a thorough, deep dive led by the State Department to determine if someone is really suitable to build a new life in America. One, he says, does not equal the other. And he uses a personal example to really drive this home. His own trusted interpreter, a man he knew and fought alongside, still had to go through a 9-month due diligence process with the State Department before being allowed into the U.S. He holds this up as the proper necessary procedure, a procedure he claims was just bypassed for thousands of people during that mass evacuation. This all leads to his final, more psychological point. He explores how, in his view, the danger doesn't stop when an ally lands in the U.S. In fact, a whole new set of risks can begin.
So the question he poses is this: even if someone was a good person, a loyal soldier back in Afghanistan, what could happen once they get here that might actually turn them against the very country that saved them?
He outlines a few potential factors that could create a dangerous combination. Imagine feeling a deep sense of betrayal after the U.S. left. Compound that with intense culture shock in a new country. Add to that the constant nagging worry for family you had to leave behind under Taliban rule. And finally, consider the drop from a respected position to maybe a low-wage job, feeling a total loss of status. He argues these factors create a really volatile mix. This quote really brings his whole argument together. He claims that when you combine the chaotic withdrawal with all the challenges these evacuees face once they're on the ground here, you've created conditions that are just ripe for resentment. And in his view, that resentment is a significant and predictable security risk. So, as we wrap up, it leaves us with this central, challenging question. The veteran's warning we've just explored is his answer. He believes that in the rush to solve one crisis, another one was created.
It's a dilemma with no easy answers, but one he argues we can no longer afford to ignore.